Well, hey, Joe.
Hello, hello.
Can I call you Joe, or is it Joseph?
Oh, I'm really not picky. Joe, Joseph, Joey, Giuseppe, Jose, Yussel, whatever.
All of the above. I love it. But no, I'm really excited to talk to you. So thank you for joining me. And,
Thank you.
I always love to start from the beginning with my guests. And so I want to ask, what was that initial connection to acting that pulled you in at such a young age? Because you've been in the business for what, like well over 30 years now. Like it's been a while.
Yeah.
Not to age you, but
Yeah, no, no, it's like, yeah, it's right. Cause I just turned 40 and I did my first job when I was 6. So what's
wow.
that? Yeah, 34 years.
Oh my
Right.
God. So what
Um,
pulled you in? Like what was that interest that really made you say like this is something I think I want to do?
well, I did a lot of, when I was a kid, I was lucky that I had a mom that was willing and able to take me to various after school activities, piano lessons, and t-ball and things like that. And I had this really great music teacher. I think that a good teacher is just about this is we're here to talk about Mr. Corman when I play a teacher.
Mhm.
I just think teachers are some of the biggest heroes in the world. But one of the first teachers I remember was this music teacher. Her name was Miss Karen. Um, and she taught a choir. I was in this like kids choir, and she also taught piano lessons. And then she started teaching these musical theater, like community theater classes, where kids were putting on plays like, Guys and Dolls and Peter Pan and musicals like that. And I just always really loved Miss Karen's class, probably a lot because of her, because she just made it really fun because she made it fun, but she also took it seriously enough. She didn't talk down to us. She didn't just let us goof off. She wanted us to try hard. And to me, that sweet spot of making it fun, but also taking it seriously enough is like that's where I kick into my flow state. And I think in her classes were some of the first times that was happening. And you know, I just always loved it. I loved performing and acting and stuff in Miss Karen's class. And then really just the luck of the draw comes into it. I happen to be born and raised in a suburb of Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, which if you don't know where the valley is, you know where the Hollywood sign is. That's in the Hollywood Hills. So if you go to the other side of those hills, then you're in the valley. And it's different than Hollywood, but although Hollywood is impeding more and more
I
on the
was gonna
valley
say.
these days. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is. But when I grew up, when I was 6, it felt pretty much like a suburb kind of anywhere
Yeah.
in the United States. And but Hollywood was just over the hill. So I happened to grow up somewhere where some of the other kids in Miss Karen's class were going on auditions for commercials and shows and things like that. And they had a manager, and their manager saw me in one of, in whatever, the Wizard of Oz or whatever it was, and asked my mom if I wanted to try going on some auditions for things like that. And I remember specifically the first conversation my mom had with me. We were in our kitchen, like putting away groceries or something, or I'm sure she was the one putting away groceries. I was
I was gonna
6,
say,
just
yeah.
fucking around, doing whatever I was
Could
doing
you
in
reach
the
the
kitchen.
shelves even?
Yeah, no,
Probably
no,
not.
definitely not. I didn't mean to say that I was putting away groceries. I should, mea culpa. I don't do enough putting away the groceries even today, as a man who can reach the shelves. Um, but she was putting away groceries, and after she was done, I remember she kind of kneeled down to me and asked me about it and said, so pretty sure that the other two boys' names are Alexander and Sebastian. Alexander and Sebastian sometimes go on these auditions where you get to kind of try out to be, the kids that are in commercials and shows and stuff on TV. And would you want to do that? And I was just really excited about the idea because, like I said, I loved going to Miss Karen's class, and the idea of getting to be on TV. I wasn't above being seduced by that, how exciting that is. And yeah, so we decided to do it. And my parents were always really supportive. but also never applied pressure. They were always, look, if you like this and you want to do it, we'll help you. And my mom drove me to audition after audition. I went to, I don't know, probably 1,000 auditions or something. And we'd do it after school. But she also always said, if you ever feel like stopping, you should just stop. You don't have to be doing this.
Right.
And I think that lack of pressure was really important as well.
For sure.
So that's sort of how it got started.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what do you think made it a lasting career? Because there's plenty of kids who, they'll go into auditions or they're in plays and whatnot. I mean, I was in plays, but I'm not you. So I guess, like, what about acting? What about that craft of acting really stuck with you made you stick with it all these years? Like, what was it about it?
Well, like I said, I really do think that at the top of that list would be just luck, just dumb luck. And I really firmly believe this, that anybody in show business who likes to say, oh, I earned everything I have, and, I deserve everything that I've got, I think that's ignoring how the world really works. And vain, frankly. Everybody who's successful in show business is lucky to some degree.
Some degree, but that luck may get you in the door, but like talent actually makes you stay. So
I agree. I won't claim that it's 100% luck. I just think it's a big.
Let me be your hype man, Joe. Let me be your hype man.
Sure,
You're selling yourself short. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we often hear, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. I mean, we often hear about the pitfalls and the horrors of child actors, and those stories are certainly valid and important. But I do think that there are some positives in there as well, if done correctly. And so, I feel like mainly it's having that opportunity to really drill into your craft for such a long time. I mean, like, you've been doing this for so long now. And so when you think back to those early years, I mean, what were some of those lessons that you learned that have, sort of laid the foundation for where you are now as an actor?
Sure. Well, like, one of the things I remember loving when I first got on a set was the kind of team aspect of it. I apologize if you can hear my voice.
Totally fine.
In the background there. The team aspect of it, that I'm here with like 100 other people, and we all have our jobs to do, and we're all trying to get this thing done. And if any of us fall down on our jobs, then we all have to do it again. So we all have to be on it. And that's whether it's, the camera operator, the costume designer, the prop department, or the actors. We all have our parts to play here. And I just remember being so thrilled as a little kid to be part of that team of a bunch of other grownups, that they're all relying on me. That just felt really exciting to have that responsibility. And then it's a thrill when I can come through and do something. I know how to do this. I can say these lines, and when I do, then I've done my part, just like you're all doing your part, and we all did it together. Like, that was always such a thrill for me. And I think really good for me. Like, to your point, you hear the horror stories about growing up as a child actor, being thrust into a position of working as a professional when you're still a kid. And I do think that those downsides are real, and there's a lot of pitfalls that I was lucky to avoid. I think, again, largely because of incredible guidance from my parents. But there are really great upsides that I would love to see more in education at large, of kids working on big projects with high stakes, where everyone has to contribute and come together as a team to make something happen. I think that's such a good experience for a kid to have, versus like, you do your homework, you get your grade, the person sitting next to you is doing their homework and getting their grade, and you don't have anything to do with each other. That's not how the world really works. That's not how we get things done as a human race.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And it actually reminds me of, your company Hit Record, because I mean, it's like the basis of it is all about collaboration. And so, I mean, for those who don't know, because I still think it's one of those items in your resume that may get buried because you've done so many like super high level
Sure,
things
sure.
like Batman, like Inception. So for those who don't know, I mean, tell us about Hit Record and how that got started, because it's really
Sure,
fantastic.
yeah. Well, Hit Record, thanks for bringing it up. It's something I care about a lot. I've been doing it for years. It's a community of people online that is all about creative collaboration. And like you mentioned, it's all about making things together. So much art and creativity online is more kind of competitive. It's like, hey, world, look at me and look at what I have done. And on Hit Record, we're always trying to focus around what can we make together? We connect up and do something together that we might not be able to do alone. And it started a long time ago. My brother helped me set up this little hobby website, and the community has just grown and evolved over the years. And, now we, there's over a million people of our registered users in our community. And we actually just yesterday, we got nominated for an Emmy. We've won 2 Emmys over the years for shows we've made. And we always, like, for example, we send out, like, the last year we won our 2nd Emmy for this show called Create Together. And we sent out certificates that we, contacted the Television Academy and got their permission and made sure that, we could put their official stamp of approval on these certificates that we sent out to thousands of people whose contributions are in the show. Because we make these things in this very open, collaborative way, where if you come to our site or download our app, you can see the projects are all kind of broken down into these steps, and anybody can jump in and contribute to one of the steps, whether you want to write or make music or draw or take a picture or contribute some video footage or do some editing or do some animation. Some of the steps are more ambitious and takes more skill and experience. A lot of the steps are really for people who, like, haven't done much art yet before, but, like, we really try to emphasize helping people kind of come out of their shells and dip their toe if they don't necessarily, a lot of people say, like, well, I'm not an artist, I can't be involved. Like, yeah, you can, you can do this. Like, try it, get used to it, and then try something harder next time. And so it's a really positive community and been a very meaningful thing for me over the years. I've been doing it for so long now, and kind of get a break from Hollywood and collaborate with just this worldwide community, people all over.
Right. Oh, that's so nice. And so, I mean, for you, like, what kind of career did you see for yourself? Like, as you were, building your star was rising in Hollywood. I mean, and, like, I guess, like, because you've done so many roles that just span so many different things, the indies, blockbusters, rom-coms, like unconventional rom-coms. So, I mean, I guess, like, when you think back over your career, like, as an actor, is there a through line? Is there something that connects all of it? Because it's wonderfully random, but I mean, for you, I mean, like, what is the through line for your career?
Yeah, I never thought about, well, I've got to, like, establish a brand and narrow it down and stick to it. I never think about that. I guess the consistent thing, if you're asking, like, what projects do I like to get involved with? I mean, for the majority of, like, if we're talking about 34 years I've been doing it, the vast majority of those years is me doing any part that anybody will give me. Auditioning a lot, and if I get a part, I'm like, great, I got a part, and I would do it. Like, that's what it was for most of the time. Then well, I guess now it's a number of years ago, 10 years ago or something like that, which is still small compared to 34 years.
Yeah.
But about 10 years ago, I did some movies that were successful enough to where I actually got to a point where I could say no to things and sort of more pick and choose what I wanted to do. And now, the thing that I'm in that's coming out in a few weeks called Mr. Corman, this is a show I made for myself. Writing and directing and working with some other great collaborators. But it's really the show that kind of I came up with that I wanted to do. And it feels like kind of a culmination of all these years of working up to that, of helping other people tell their stories. And now finally kind of getting to tell a story that I want to tell.
Yeah.
but yeah, so I don't know what the through line is to answer your question, other than, of those last 10 years, when I have more choice in the matter, it's just whatever inspires me, really. I know that sounds generic, but something
No.
that turns me on, that gets me excited, that, when I'm looking at a script, if I start reading it and I'm not always aware of it, but I'll sometimes just start reading it aloud.
Right.
And I moved from reading it silently to reading it out loud. And I don't even necessarily notice I'm doing it right away, but then I'm like, oh, okay, this is working somehow, some way.
Right. And so, I mean, is there a particular role that you would say really stretched you as an actor? Because of you have that versatility, because you've done so much. I'm just curious, is there one role that really presented a challenge in a good way of like just stretching your abilities of what you can do?
Sure. Yeah, so many. That is definitely something I look for. I try to find those things. Um, for example, I was in a movie that came out last year called 7500. Sort of
Intense.
a little, yeah, very intense movie. It is European, small, kind of more art film type of thing. And the reason I wanted to do it was the first acting I had done in a number of years, because when I had kids and became a dad, I took some time off. And I wanted my first acting job back to be really challenging. I didn't want to just do something that I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I was looking forward to, like, let me find something to do that'll be hard.
Why?
And
not, not,
this
not,
was
not endorsing laziness, but like, why
yeah.
not just ease into it?
I don't know, man. I've been doing it a long time. Like, that just didn't excite me. Like, getting back into it and having it be kind of easy, or like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Like, that didn't sound like so interesting. It was sort of a momentous thing for me. The time I took off when I became a dad was the longest break I'd ever taken from acting, ever since I was 6 years old.
Wow.
And so it felt like, just even personally, like, I want to make this a challenge for myself. I want to really go for it if I'm going to come back and do this again. And not if, I mean, since I'm going to come back and do this again. And 7500 presented this incredible challenge. Like you said, it's a very intense movie. It was mostly improvised.
Mm-hmm.
The director has this very unconventional technique where they leave the camera rolling for like 30-40 minutes at a time, and you just kind of like live in this world. And it's really different than anything I'd done before. And that's saying something, because I've done a lot, so it's rare to come by a process where I'm like, wow, I haven't tried that, let's see. And so that was why I chose that one. And then right after that, I did a movie called Project Power that was very easy. It was just fun. I got to work with Jamie Foxx and go to New Orleans and run around and do action scenes. And it was like, I can't say that was challenging, but we had a blast. And so that was a different reason why I wanted to do it. And then, after that, I got to do a thing with Aaron Sorkin, which he's, doing a courtroom drama with Aaron Sorkin called Trial of the Chicago 7. And that was a challenge in a whole different way. So I don't know. I like a lot of different things. Sometimes I'm eclectic with the movies I like to watch too. Sometimes I want to watch something, just like I love watching Moana with my boys, but I also really love watching, I don't know, what's an example? La Strada, the Fellini movie, or whatever.
Yeah.
I like a wide variety of things. And so I guess I like to work on a wide variety of things too.
Right. And you talk about Mr. Corman, and I want to dive into it, but first I want to talk about Don John, because I actually rewatched it
Oh,
recently in
nice.
preparation for, because I watched it when it came out and I loved it. And I was like, I want to revisit this, just and see if it holds up. And so, of course,
Great.
that was your directorial debut in 2013.
Yeah.
And before I give my comments, I'm curious to hear from you. I mean, through the lens of where you are now as an artist, I mean, what do you make of a film like Don John?
Yeah. I feel really proud of it. It's been, I haven't watched it. What's it been? I watched it sometime in the last couple of years, I think. Few years, as I was getting ready to start on Mr. Corman, because like you said, Don John was the first feature I ever got to direct. and Mr. Corman is really the next time. I've directed lots of little things, shorts and unscripted things and music documentaries and stuff, but this is the next time I'm like directing like doing some good old fashioned filmmaking. And I guess I watched it then, and to me, yeah, I really love it. I mean, I think when I was making Don John, I knew one of the things I love about acting is playing someone different from myself. And so I knew I wanted to play a character that was really different from me, that other people might not think of me as, that, I wouldn't usually get cast as that person. And that was a challenge that was intriguing to me. And also, the origin of that story had to do with something I think about a great deal, which is the media and how media impacts how we see ourselves. That's something I've thought about my whole life, because ever since I was a little kid and I was in this rarefied position to be on TV, that would change how people related to me. They, when I would go to school, people say, "Oh, you're the kid on TV," or "You're the kid, you were in that commercial," or "You're in Angels in the Outfield," and relate to me differently, therefore. And then of course I had my close friends who didn't really see me that way, because I guess they got to know me beyond that. But it was always something that I've just spent a lot of time thinking about, is like, how does the media that we watch change how we see people? And I always sort of felt like, man, oftentimes when people get to know me, first meet me, they don't see me as like a quote unquote normal person. They see me as like, "Oh, you're that thing that I've seen on the screen." And I don't want to complain about it. Like I said, I'm very grateful and lucky to get to do the things I do, but it is like a strange thing that happens, that I've experienced ever since I was a kid. And so I I always sort of saw a connection between how people relate to actors and how people relate to pornography. That pornography is sort of, if you extremize it, it's like that sort of, the way that we, I'll include myself, watch pornography. We're not thinking of the people on screen who are having sex. We're not thinking about who they are as a person.
Yeah, right.
We just see them as things for our pleasure. And so I actually thought that served as a really great metaphor, not just for how people view actors, but kind of how people view everybody in a way, and their whole lives and worlds. And so I wanted to sort of portray a character who everything is not like, he never really considers someone else as a whole person. Everybody in his life, whether it's the women in his love life, or it's his buddies, or it's his family, or whoever it is, they're a thing to him. And that was sort of the thinking behind Don John. And that's when, and I ended up kind of making up this character of, like, I also am just a fan of the old Molière Don Juan play, and sort of like made it, and Don John's not really a close adaptation of that play. That play ends in tragedy. This is like you said, an unconventional romantic comedy, but sort of like, who would a Don Juan be today? And I like the idea, well, he'd be addicted to porn. And treating people like that, treating everybody like a thing that he sees on a screen, that's there for his consumption, as opposed to a whole person that's just as much of a person as he is. And then I wanted to, of course, like, make it so that he grows a bit and learns, whereas in the original Molière Don Juan, he doesn't learn. He suffers a tragedy and he dies in the end.
I mean, one thing that I was reminded of when I rewatched Don John was like how clear you were out the gate with your vision as a director? Because there's so many, stylistic touches, even just the story structure. There's a lot of like repetition and like him going to church and like him going to the gym. Like there's a lot of like very clear moments like where you were setting up, this character in his world. And it's like I said, it felt like he had such a clear vision going into it. And there were touches of it that reminded me when I was watching Mr. Corman that, really stood out to me. And so, when you figure out the story that you want to tell, how do you go about figuring out how to tell it? Because there's a million ways you could have told the story of Don John or Mr. Corman, and I think you tell these stories in such a through a really interesting lens. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your creative process for getting these ideas out, because it's one thing to come up with them and then a different thing to get it out there.
That's flattering. Thank you. I don't really see it as two separate processes. It's interesting how you're, and I see why you're saying that. Like there's one thing to come up with the story, and then it's another thing to come up with how you tell it. But there's a known saying, it's Marshall McLuhan quote, the medium is the message, which is just to say the story itself and how you tell the story are not as distinct as you think they are. In fact, they're so interwoven, and one impacts the other so much that you can't even separate them. And I'm maybe bastardizing the use of that McLuhan quote a little bit, but like for me, writing the story and then thinking about what we were going to do with camera or what we were going to do with music or editing or any of those things weren't separate processes. I was thinking about all that stuff while I was writing it. And because I guess I grew up on sets and in that process of making shows and movies. So that's how my mind works. Like when I think of how to tell a story, I think of camera and edit as performance. And that's sort of the language of storytelling for me. Someone who, grew up in a different time, say before movies, they would think in terms of, staging, or they'd think in terms of oration, or, nowadays people think in terms of, like I'm not an expert gamer in the slightest, but there's like whole new modes of storytelling that are happening in video games and interactive media that where if you grow up playing video games and that's your main mode of thinking about story, then that's how your mind is going to tell stories. And so, right. My mind is very much indoctrinated into the format of filmmaking. And so that's kind of how I think when I tell stories. Like if I'm telling my kids a story, I don't tell them about like what I would be doing with the camera, but my mind's doing that. Even if could. Yeah, I could if they were interested.
Little filmmakers.
Yeah.
Get them to take over your empire. But like, I mean, I feel like because Mr. Corman is I've only seen the 6 episodes that they sent me, but it is so fantastic.
Well, that's cool. You got to watch 6 episodes.
Oh my God. It's so good. Like I feel
thanks,
like
man.
No, I'm being very,
it's
very
still
honest.
new for me. Like you're not very, I haven't talked to very many people that have seen it, so this is still like a really new experience for me. I'm really happy you liked it. Thank you.
I know, because I mean, first of all, the story is incredibly relatable as a 30-something myself, often feeling a bit lost in a way. And you often question why you feel, because you have everything that, you have a roof over your head, you have a job, you have this, but like why am I still anxious? Why am I still unhappy? And so there's a lot that I personally relate to. But I mean, for you, where did the show even begin for you? Like how, because it feels personal. I don't know you, I just met you today and I want to anything on you, but it does feel like it feels a little personal. So like, where did the story of Mr. Corman start for you?
Yeah, it is personal. And sort of how I said, like with Don John, I was interested in playing a character that was really different from myself. With Mr. Corman, it sort of began with, what if I were to play something like very close to myself? And I wasn't interested in playing myself. First of all, because I think that would drive me insane, because I like privacy and I don't like the idea of like putting my life on display for, the entertainment of an audience. But even beyond that, I actually don't think that, I don't know. I don't know that my life would even really make good television show. But it came from me sort of thinking a lot about just the life I live and feeling deeply grateful for where I'm at in my life. I actually just looked back at some of my the earliest notes. The first time I ever wrote down the idea, it was from 2015, which is the year I first became a dad. And so I think kind of arriving at adulthood in a way, becoming a dad, there's no more ifs, ands, or buts. Like up until that, I was like, am I an adult? I don't really know. Maybe. When do you really cross that threshold? Like, but once I became a dad, I was like, there's just no question. I'm the grown up. He's the baby. That's what it is.
You got your stamp that day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dad.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Dad, grown up. But so that sort of made me reflect a lot on, okay, so now I'm a grown up. What is my life? Where have I arrived at? And I felt so lucky and continue to feel so lucky and grateful. I have a partner that I love deeply. We have our kids. I have two parents who are nurturing and positive. Like you said, I get to do work that I care about. I am healthy. I'm safe. I have enough money. I have so many things to be grateful for. And I really do think that, and we talked about this a minute ago, I think a lot of those things do come down to luck. I mean, I could have just as easily not run into Tasha, like maybe we wouldn't have met. I have friends who are like lovely people who just haven't met their partner yet. They just haven't met him yet, and or what if, instead of two incredible parents, what if I had one great parent and one who was more of a problem? Like that could have just as easily happened as well. And or what if, like we were talking about with show business, I know so many great artists, talented artists who've worked very, very hard, who don't get to do it for a living the way that I do. I think a lot of it has to do, I did get lucky to some degree. And so, starting to think about like, well, what would my life be if there were a few of these differences? And that's where this character came about. His name is Josh Corman instead of Joseph Gordon, but he's a lot like me. He walks and talks like me. He's from where I'm from. He went to high school where I went to high school. He thinks a lot of the same ways that I think. He likes a lot of the same things that I like, but there are these differences. And so that was sort of the beginning, is kind of that self-reflection and thought experiment that led to coming up with this character. And I always thought that if I didn't get to do what I'm doing in show business, that teaching is something I would really love doing. Yeah. And so he teaches fifth grade at a public school in the Valley where I grew up. And that was sort of the origin of the show.
And you brought up luck a few times, and I wonder, do you ever feel guilty for the luck that you've had?
Yes. Yes, I do.
I'm asking from a very personal place because, as my career in journalism, I moved to New York in 2008 to pursue a career in journalism. And as we all remember, the country was just falling to utter shit, and everything was magazines were folding, everything. And I've never been without a job, while so many people have like lost there's never been a gap. I think the longest I went without a job was like 3 days, and I found one like instantly because a magazine I was working at folded. I found another job down the hall. And so I feel like there's a part of me that, as you're saying,
you're a good interviewer. So
but no, that's the thing. I feel like it's one of those, it's a feeling where there's a million great interviewers. And it's like I sometimes fall into that mindset of myself, just wondering like, is like, how much of it is dumb luck and how much of it is actual talent? And a part of me does feel guilty sometimes because even during the pandemic, like I still have this fantastic full-time job, and I wound up having like 2 really high profile freelance gigs that just came out of nowhere. I wasn't looking for them. They just fell in my lap. And so I do kind of feel guilty. And so asking for a friend, the friend that is me. Um, how do you deal with that guilt?
Yeah. I mean, part of it, I think, is focusing on gratitude and doing my best to not take for granted the good luck that I've had. And I can't say that I succeed in that in every moment, but I really try to keep it front of mind. That's both my partner and I. We talk about it all the time, of being grateful and feeling lucky. And I think even just saying it often is good for me. Uh, and it's no coincidence I wrote a show all about how, like, there could be a different version of me that is, leading a different life, just largely because of different luck.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know, I like to think that I try to be helpful to other people. I can't claim that I'm like perfectly altruistic or anything. If I were perfectly altruistic, I probably wouldn't be working in show business. I would be.
No, you would not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. But I try to do what I can to be some kind of positive influence on other people. And, that's I think a lot of what Hit Record is for me. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to frame it in terms of your question of guilt. But I think if I'm really honest, there is some of that. There's some amount of me feeling like, man, why do I get to do all this? There's so many people out there who would love to be doing the things that I'm doing. And Hit Record is a way that I'm like, well, let's all do some stuff together. And it's not, I won't say that guilt drives it, but like, I do think there's some component of that. It's also beyond the guilt. I find it just like really fun and like kind of nourishing for my soul and meaningful and uplifting to do the projects that we do, right. These collaborative Hit Record projects. But yeah, what you're talking about is definitely part of it.
Yeah. And, sorry to derail with the conversation of guilt, but I just had to ask that one question.
I think that's a fascinating question. That's very pertinent to Mr. Corman. And by the way, here's the thing. I'm describing him as someone who's had, some strokes of luck that put him in a position that one might say is like less desirable than mine, I guess you could say, if you're being judgmental or something about it. But here's the thing. Josh Corman has so much to be grateful for too. He has so much to be grateful for.
Right.
He has a steady job. He has somewhere to live. He's safe. He's healthy. He's
his mental health is a
straight white male living in Los Angeles. Like, he's got a lot, to be, that he has a lot of advantages and a lot to be grateful for. And he doesn't always feel that way too. So, there's always someone you can point to where you're like, they've got it better than me. They're luckier than I am, or they made the right decisions when I made the wrong ones, or like they're doing better, or they're higher on the totem pole, or whatever. You can always point to someone. And I certainly can. I try not to spend my time doing that, but I'd be lying if I told you that I never fall down that kind of rabbit hole of thinking.
Of course.
And, all of us, if anybody out there has the means to be listening to a Fast Company podcast, probably has a lot to be grateful for that a lot of people in the world don't,
If you say so, I'll take that. But I mean, the one thing that outside of just the subject matter of Mr. Corman, the other part that I really enjoy are these fantastical touches throughout the show.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to ruin anything for people because I want people to really enjoy it. But I mean, there's a musical number, there's like this insane fight sequence. And so, I mean, all takes place in a pretty, I know it's a comedy, but it's pretty heavy at some points. And so, I mean, what was behind some of those creative choices? Like, why take this show to that almost surreal level at sometimes? Like, what was the thinking behind that?
That's just, those are some of my favorite things to do. And I mean, what I always try to focus on with Mr. Corman is making it feel real. And to me, life, if you're talking about what real life feels like, sometimes real life feels like that. Sometimes a old-fashioned song and dance, or a bizarro fight sequence are the only ways to really capture how life can really feel. Because sometimes life does feel larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
It feels that way sometimes. And I actually remember, it's funny, one of the first people that I shared the first draft of the first script with is one of my good friends, Ryan Johnson, who's a writer and director that has done so many things like Knives Out and Star Wars. And I was in his first movie, Brick, and we did his third movie, Looper, together. And he's very good friend of mine, and such a brilliant artist. And when he read the first draft of Mr. Corman, his biggest piece of feedback was, this all feels really great and really grounded, but I know you, and I know you have like this playful streak. You like, if this is a show you're going to do, are you going to love doing it over and over and over again? Like, what's going to really turn you on? What are you going to have a lot of fun doing? Because I want to see that. And
a great note.
and there was such a great piece of feedback, and I started kind of peppering in weirder things that because that's my taste of like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, if I'm making the show, well then this could happen and that could happen. We could do this, we could do that. And once those floodgates opened, the possibilities just felt endless. And I love those sequences you're talking about. I'm glad you enjoyed them. They were so much fun to make, and I'm really proud of them.
I bet. And so, I love to close out the podcast always with the same question, because I'm just it tickles me when I hear everyone's different answers. But at this point in your career, how have you come to define creativity?
I come to define creativity. Yeah, it's so funny. I think about this all the time.
I know you do. You had a podcast about
it. Yeah. It can mean so many things, right? But the thing that I try to focus on the most is a feeling that I get sometimes when I'm in the middle of it, when I'm like really in the zone and doing the thing, whatever it is, whether it's acting, like when when cameras start rolling and you're going and you're in the scene, or if it's writing and I'm like just in the thick of the train of thought and really thinking about it and like having an idea, or deciding that idea is bad, or that whole wrestling match when I'm just really in it, whatever it is. Or I could be sitting there like, just strumming the same 3 chords on a guitar, not doing anything productive at all, but just kind of in the middle of just doing that. Whatever it takes, I have different ways that get me to this feeling, but that's the feeling for me that I care the most about, that makes me the happiest. If I have a day where I got to have that feeling, it's a good day. And being creative is the way that I get to have that feeling. I also have it other times in my family life and as a dad, but that's a separate question. And there's lots of creativity to parenting. Yeah. But yeah, that feeling, you can call it like flow. And there's even there's a science here that, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but you could read a great book called Flow, which is all about this feeling, and different people arrive at it different ways. There's another movie I recommend. It's a documentary called Happiness. It was made by a friend of mine named Rocco Bellic. Really like kind of short, simple, great documentary about positive psychology and like how people arrive at this feeling.
Right.
But yeah, to me, to answer your question in a as precise a way as possible, how would I define creativity? It's that feeling.
And real quick follow-up. I mean, how do you get to that feeling for people who are feeling, stuck, or feeling like they they're just staring at that white page and they don't know what's going to come next. I mean, what works for you to get to that feeling?
Other people.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to
I
do
knew
it by myself.
you were going to say that. It comes back to
Yeah.
collaboration. It's true.
Yeah, it's exactly, that's how, because for me, some people don't like doing it with other people. For me, I don't know if it's because of how I grew up in Miss Karen's class or on set, or I don't know. I tend to think most humans are this way. We're social creatures. Most creativity is more of a social thing. If you go back to ancient humans, storytelling happened around a campfire. It didn't happen with a single this is before writing was invented. People weren't telling stories by themselves. Storytelling was something that happened socially. Music was always something that happened socially. Painting, whatever the mode of expression it was, you were doing it together with other people. I think that's primal. And so for me, finding that flow is real hard alone. I do it better with other people. And even if I had an idea for Mr. Corman, it's not going to be very long before I start talking to people about it and needing some of that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
And of course, I can't help it, but it's really true. This is what Hit Record is all about: is finding that flow and coming together with a community of people who help each other find that flow together. Because it's like you mentioned the blank page. You're right. Staring at a blank page and be like, what do I want to write today? That's really difficult. The whole point of Hit Record is you come and you feel like writing. There's a whole bunch of writing prompts that someone came up with that you're like, here, write about this. We're all writing about that. You could read what some other people are writing. You could build on what they did, or you could like just start with a little idea or the same prompt and get going. Whatever it takes, just get it going. Right. And we'll do it together. That's for me how I can find it is other people.
I love that.
Thanks,
Joe. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was a great conversation.
I'm your host, KC Finey, and this is Creative Conversation, a Fast Company podcast.